All right, in this video, we're going to be going over district placement and trying to maximize adjacency in a couple of starts. So we're going to be re-rolling a couple of starts and placing map tags with the map tags mod you can find here in the Steam Workshop. And we're going to be trying to get the maximum adjacencies possible to give you guys a good idea of how to place your buildings in order to maximize your yields in every city you place. So starting off with this example, we can settle in place. And a couple things to go over is that every city is going to need 2 science and production tiles. And these buildings have adjacency to resources. 1 or 2 slots, depending on what civ or strategy you're going for, 1 or 2 tiles for gold and food adjacency buildings. And these have adjacency to coast and navigable rivers. And then 2 tiles for culture and happiness adjacency. And these buildings have adjacency to mountainous terrain, natural wonders, and all buildings have adjacency to wonders. So we're going to use wonders, world wonders, to be able to fill in the gaps of our adjacencies. So getting started with this example, we can see that we have a lot of resources. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 resources reachable in the capital here. Actually, a 5th one, 6. So lots of good resources to get science adjacency from. We can go ahead and start placing some of these adjacencies down. So we know we're going to want our science and production adjacencies in these 2 spots, because these have double adjacencies. From the start, we have only 1 mountain able to be reached. However, this is very far and hard to place wonders around, but we'll keep the spot in mind in terms of placing a cultural building here. We have some decent coastal adjacencies. So, for instance, this spot here is a double. So the first 2 buildings you're going to place down in every city are going to be your brickyard and saw pit. So we need to think about where they're going to go. And I think in this city, I think it's a good idea to use these 2 buildings as a bridge to be able to get to our science and production tiles. So I think we can place a saw pit here and a brickyard here. Having a quarter adjacent to the palace will provide a +1 science and +1 culture adjacency to the palace, as we can see here. So we're going to want to place our early districts adjacent to our city center. All right, so we're going to follow that rule when we place our monument and altar, which we'll be researching early. So we can again use this as a bridge to get out to this science and production tile, or we can use it to bridge to get here. So I think that's actually a better option. So what we can do is we can place our monument here and our altar in this spot. But you can see here we have multiple buildings all around this tile. So we have a couple water wonders in this age that we can place. Best being most likely Colossus. Colossus is highly contended over, so if you don't get it, you can always try Great Lighthouse. And there are water wonders in the Exploration Age too, if you miss both of those. But I find the Great Lighthouse is seldomly built by the D&D AI. Looking forward, we have placed more buildings down, and we can see we're getting another group of buildings around here. So I think an excellent spot for another wonder would be right here. And we have these 2 same buildings here. So we could place another wonder. This is also adjacent to a river. Again, this could be really a lot of these wonders. But let's say we got Pyramid of the Sun. We could put this here. And that means our second culture building has an excellent adjacency right here. Because we have now created 2 wonders that are providing adjacency to this tile, as you can see here. So, like I said earlier, this mountain is far out of the way, and building buildings and wonders out to it is going to be more difficult than it's worth. But just by building these three wonders here, we can see we've maximized a huge amount of adjacency. Only one of our main yields adjacencies is away from our wonders. So I think for Antiquity, this is a great setup. I think this is about pretty much every building you want to build. You could also, if you wanted to build all buildings, you could put your lighthouse here for a massive adjacency. The bath could go here for some decent, or at least some adjacency from your Great Stele. We have the early brickyard and soffit to bridge out to our science and production tile. Our monument to altar is placed adjacent to our palace. So these two quarters are providing us +1, will provide us +1 science and culture adjacency to our palace. So everything kind of flows in terms of your building order pretty well. The early buildings are close to your city center, and the more expensive buildings and wonders are on the periphery. So I think this is a good setup for this city. Let's move on to our next example. All right, so we have our second example here, and let's get started. So a reminder that our first two buildings are always going to be our brickyard and our saw pit. So we want to first figure out where those are going to go, but we want to make sure we're not placing those on tiles that we're going to want in the future. So the first thing we're going to notice here in this settlement is that we have a mountain here, a cluster of resources that is providing a +2 science adjacency, and then another +3 science adjacency. So this is going to be a highly valuable science city, and I'm sure we can get some good culture going around these mountains. Unfortunately, we're a bit far from the coast, so let's go get started. Let's place some tax. I think we've already talked about placing our science and production adjacencies here, so let's just get that out of the way. We know the first 4 buildings we're going to build are the saw pit and the brickyard, and then the next 2 buildings will be the altar and the monument. The monument has culture adjacencies, obviously, so it has adjacencies to mountains. So I think we can take advantage of that. Because again, we want to place it adjacent to our city center. So this accomplishes both the requirements of placing next to a mountain and a adjacency to the city center. Brickyard and saw pit here. That's what we're going to do. So there's really 3 options, and for the brickyard and saw pit, I think all 3 of these are fine. You could probably have good adjacencies no matter which spot you picked here, but just not these 2, right? And so in the early game, we might have placed our brickyard and saw pit here if we didn't place these tacks. So now, as we discussed previously, we have our 2 science and production tiles. We need another culture and happiness adjacency. And I think since we already have a buildings here, and we put our brickyard and saw pit here, we can go ahead and place another one here, and place a wonder. Again, I'm just going to be using the Great Stele. Oh, actually, Great Stele must be placed on flat terrain, so this will have to be a different wonder. This could be, say, a Mundo Perdido, since we're in tropics. We're definitely going to want to place some food and gold buildings. We don't see an amazing spot for it, but what we can do is say we got an additional wonder. So let's say we got Gate of All Nations here. This now becomes a +2 adjacency for food and gold, right? So this arrangement of wonders is pretty good. So this diagonal provides a +2 adjacency to buildings on either side of this. So for this game, I also chose a different civilization. I chose the Maya, who have a unique quarter. And so we can also think about where we'd want to place this. So for the Maya unique quarter, you want to place it on a forested terrain, or vegetated, sorry. That way you get the extra +2 science from the Kuna. And I think an excellent spot would be right here. So we can place the Kuna and the Jala together. And this is providing us both an additional quarter adjacency to our palace and the necessary requirements for this unique quarter. And again, now we've found ourselves with a 2 tiles with good adjacencies on them, so we can, if we wound up later having the opportunity to build a wonder. This is next to a river, so let's say we could build our anchor watt here. And I would say this sets us up well for our adjacencies. And again, this is very easy to accomplish. We have a lot of districts placed around our city center. In fact, we've pretty much maximized that. And in terms of tiles to work, right, you'd be working at the start of the game, you would be working a lot of these tiles. But as you fill it in, you would be able to expand to this rough and vegetated terrain surrounding the city. So I think that does it for this example. I will see you in the next one. All right, so coming up on our final example here, we have a very interesting spawn. I'm glad we got this seed, as this spawn is going to provide us with more challenges that we've had in the past. So in the past two examples, we have had plenty of room to build out our districts, as well as having plenty of rural tiles to have production in our empire. However, this city possibly doesn't have that available to us. We have mountains to our north, coast, and a lake immediately adjacent to our city, and even more mountains down here, right? So the amount of tiles workable in this city are quite low. And I would say for a good capital, you should have 5 to 7 rural workable tiles. So that means 5 to 7 rough or vegetated terrain that you're never going to place districts on in that city. This city, that might not be an option. So maybe we might have to cut back on some of the buildings that we're building. And even more of a challenge, I picked Greece this game, and Greece has a unique quarter that is very powerful. So we're going to want to place that down. So let's get started. So again, the first two buildings we're going to build in every city are going to be the brickyard and saw pit. So we're going to be thinking about where they're going to go. And we're going to also have the back in our minds that the Greece unique quarter is best if placed on rough terrain. So the Parthenon provides +2 influence if placed on rough terrain. We'll want to be taking advantage of that, either with this rough terrain here, seemingly, or this rough terrain here, as there are not many options for us. Again, we're going to be wanting to place our monuments and altar early. So I think that because this is both adjacent to the city center and has a double cultural adjacency, I think this makes an excellent spot for our monument and altar. So we can go ahead and place those down. And since we're seemingly going to be starting to prioritize this for other types of good adjacency buildings, I think it's the best idea to place our brickyard and saw pit as way away from these buildings, because they are providing us good adjacency. Because we took this rough terrain, we'd want to place our Parthenon on this rough terrain, so we no longer have really any more flexibility on where to place this unique quarter, and we're going to need a bridge out to this somehow. So I think a wonder would make a great, would do very well just right here. And obviously that makes good adjacency for this spot right here. So we kind of have our culture and happiness set up very well. So even though we don't have a ton of terrain in this city, at least we're going to have very strong culture and happiness yields. So this is the first game where we have had relatively weak science and production yields or adjacencies. So I think an easy place for our first library and blacksmith would be, or sorry, library and barracks would be here, just because it has +1 adjacency and is on going to also provide us with the palace adjacency. And then for our next one, we can either place it here, or we could bridge with a water district, or say, because the science and production buildings come so late in the age, we could build a water wonder. Say that if we got the Colossus, we could build it here, and then use that to bridge out to another science and production building, right? So obviously these adjacencies are pretty weak. We could definitely place a wonder here, and it would be serviceable. Yeah, the Coliseum is great for adjacencies because all it has to do is be placed next to a district. And for our final building placements, I think we can put our food and gold adjacency here, and then we have an extra slot in our palace for another decent +3 gold adjacency. So where does that leave us with rough tiles to be worked by our city? Well, we can go ahead and place tax on where these improvements are going to be to see where we're going to be at for terrain that is workable. So this tile will be workable. In order to work this, we'll have to bridge out to it. So we'd have to use a fishing key, or better yet, the new harbor. If I hover over this terrain here, this is also rough. So this is another mine. This tile is a mine. This tile is a mine, as we've discussed previously. This tile is a mine. And this tile is a woodcutter. And this tile is a woodcutter. So where does that leave us? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 workable rural tiles once the city is built out. And now that water yields are better, this reef here is also a good tile, right? So this will be providing us with this harbor, and we could presumably also place a fishing key here. This would be providing us with 3 food and 2 production, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, so even in a city here that had relatively questionable adjacencies, and I would say if I spawned in, I would be relatively dismayed at this start. But as you can see, with careful planning, we were able to get extremely solid adjacencies with a good amount of rural tiles still able to be worked to provide plenty of production to this city here. So hopefully this video is helpful to you guys. I'll see you in the next one.